All right, everyone, welcome back to the channel. Like I said, I've been cooking up. I've been trying to get a ton of content out for you guys. So don't forget, like, comment, share, and subscribe. Also, my Instagram name has changed. There'll be an update on that next week. You guys don't want to miss next week's video. It's a banger, I promise you. Going to be the last one before the year ends. So stay tuned for that. For now, let's get on with this restoration. Let's jump right in and see what we got. So first thing I pull out is going to be this oyster bracelet. Now this is a 16700 reference GMT. This is a non-SEL watch. And unfortunately this watch has seen better days. Someone sent this in, he ended up going in the ocean, and unfortunately it got waterlogged and it's been sitting for a few months. So first thing I notice as soon as I open up this case back, this thing is wrecked. I mean, it's absolutely wrecked. Every single part on here is completely seized. Here I am trying to move the rotor around. I mean, it just doesn't want to go. So I can actually see the balance wheel moving a little bit, but this thing needs a full restoration, and that's what we're going to do. So as you guys can see, there is just a ton of rust buildup. I don't know exactly how long this has been sitting, but a lot of this water has just converted over to rust. Pretty much all the bridges, all of the cap jewels, the balance, the hairspring, a lot of the screw heads are just completely gone. This one here has decided to disintegrate. So this is not going to be fun by any means. It's not going to be easy. However, I love getting stuff like this done. You know, bringing it back to life and putting it back on someone's wrist. I mean, it's just a great feeling. So, I mean, there's a ton of sand in this watch. I mean, there's so much buildup. There's rust in every thread. There's rust all in the tube channel. I mean, this thing is not going to be easy once again. Guys, if your watch gets waterlogged, don't put it in rice. It needs to be addressed immediately. So now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to start removing hands. Now, this dial is 100% aftermarket. I mean, this thing is crumbling at the tip of the tweezer. Not a good quality dial at all, but we'll address that later on. I'm going to pull the dial off here, remove the date carrier plate. Once again, rust made its way all the way up to here. So now this is where the real fun begins, trying to disassemble this watch. I mean, a ton of these screw heads, they are just not coming out. Now, when you have stuff like this, you're pretty much, your only option is either A, the screw comes out, or B, it's stripped. Now, here's the automatic module. This thing is completely seized. All the reversing wheels, the rotor, I mean, just absolutely everything here, completely seized. I'm going to try and disassemble this, but a lot of these screws are just completely stripped. They're going to need to be drilled out or extracted one way or another. So to my surprise, this thing actually came apart flawlessly. However, these things have seen better days. These are not savable parts. I mean, the bridge itself we could probably repair and save, but a lot of these smaller, finicky parts, you just can't reuse. It's not worth it. It's not worth the headache in the long run. I'm going to start taking absolutely everything apart. The rotor itself is completely seized inside of there, so I'm going to have to break that apart by hand. Now we get a better look. I'm going to keep on moving, disassembling this. We're going to take the screws out of the balance bridge. Once again, the balance bridge itself is actually seized on the studs. So we get that out, take a closer look at that a little bit later. Remove the balance guard. Now we can move over to the train wheels. Remove that bridge. Once again, surprise, surprise. Nice amount of rust. Even these wheels, I know the great wheel, the seconds wheel, and the third wheel, it might look good on camera. However, under a microscope, these things are just not reusable. So right here is when I realized how quickly my luck had ran out. These main plate screws, they're just completely disintegrated. They are stuck in the main plate. They're going to have to be drilled out, extracted. A lot of these parts are just fused together. They just don't want to come apart. So a lot of these things are going to have to be taken apart in sections, fully assembled. Just the only way to get this thing fully apart so I could start cleaning and make sure what's reusable and what's not. I mean, the barrel here is stuck to the bridge, the ratchet wheel. There's sand underneath this bridge. I mean, there's just no saving it. I'm going to pull off this minute pinion, pull out the balance stop. Nice amount of rust under there. Now we can flip it to dial side up and start moving this carrier plate. So we got the date wheel off, and you guys will notice one of these screws was completely fused to this carrier plate. It had to be drilled out. It's not the cleanest, but I will have to address that later. You guys will see it right there, top left. Get the carrier plate off, and I mean, look at the amount of rust. This is a part that can be saved. just got to be cleaned up. I'm going to start removing all the motion works, get out the date wheel mounted, pretty much start disassembling everything up top. A lot of this keyless work stuff, I'm expecting there to be a ton of rust, but you never really know. Now, anyone that works on these watches, you know how much pressure is actually behind this little spring. Once you get this date wheel mounted off, there's a tiny little jewel. Let go of the spring too quick and that thing is going to fly away. You'll never find it. But so to my surprise, there's not a lot of rust under these parts. But for the most part, this can be cleaned up. I'm just hoping I can get all these strip screws out so that I could save this main plate. Now this right here is where all the fun begins, guys. Now we can start the cleanup. This is where you really see where things are salvageable and you start seeing this watch come back to life. Now this is just a 2-mix polish with a piece of pegwood. I'm going to go over all the bridges. I need to make sure that every single piece of rust is gone. Now, bridges are actually made out of brass. They're just nickel plated. And if you rub too hard, a lot of this stuff is going to come off. The only way to save that is to replate it. But this is so meticulous, guys. I don't think a lot of people understand how much work goes into something like this. You really need to get into every nook and crevice of all these parts. It's not simple, it's not quick, it's not clean, and more importantly, it is not easy. Very time consuming process, but we're going to keep on moving along. So as soon as I got to this point, I actually realized this rotor has so much pitting. There's so much rust that's actually eaten through the top coat. I mean, there's just nothing that I could really do. I could only clean it up to the point where it's perfectly fine and usable, but I'm going to have to refinish the underside of this. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm lapping it on just a piece of 600 grit sandpaper just to get out a majority of the pitting, put a nice finish back on it, and make sure that we have nothing flaking off. I mean, it's not going to win any beauty pageants, but that's not the point here. We got off all the rust, most of the pitting. Basically, we're just going for 100% functionality. Now, this is a preliminary cleaning. There's a ton of time. It's very meticulous, but you can't just do this once and call it a day. As you can see, there's some rust left over on this post for the click. So this is going to be a multiple stage cleaning. This is pretty much just to assess the damage, see what's usable and what is not. This balance bridge itself, completely not usable. At this point, I'm just cleaning it for fun. There's way too much rust built up in the screw post that connects the hairspring. The keef, all the cap jewels, they're just gone. So right here, OCD got the best of me yet again. A lot of the keyless works components, the finishes, they were just completely gone after being cleaned up. So I was trying to refinish them, try and make them look all pretty. A lot of these are going to be replaced anyway, just for functionality purposes. But I still wanted to try and fix them up, try and make them look all pretty. So hand lapping absolutely everything, making sure we have nice factory finishes. It's just more of a fun project. Just wanted to see if I could do it. And I was pretty happy with the outcome. So with the movement all cleaned up, now I can turn my attention over to this screw. So usually I'll drill these out and extract them. However, it's a painstaking process. Here's something that I actually learned pretty recently. You use some alum powder inside of a boiling pot, and believe it or not, the results are insane. This will actually dissolve any steel components. It's not quick by any means. Drilling it out and retapping is a lot quicker, but you guys can actually see the screw dissolving here. Pretty wild. It actually worked. I didn't have to drill this one out, thank God. But this was not quick. It took roughly almost a day or 2 days to actually come out. So, I mean, you be the judge. Figure out how you want to spend your time. So I'm going to keep on disassembling here. We're going to start removing all the cap jewels. Give everything a final rinse in 99% alcohol just before we throw it in the machine. So now everything's rinsed off. Everything's pretty much clean. So now we could start putting everything away in baskets. Now, smaller, more fragile parts such as the escape wheel, cap jewels, little things like that, springs, you don't want them hitting into other heavier movement parts. So I like to separate everything. Now we can put everything back in, load up this basket, and then we're ready to put it in the cleaning machine. So I know everyone's going to ask me, Peter, what type of cleaning machine is this? Guys, this is an L&R Mastermatic cleaning machine. I was lucky enough to find one new old stock in the original packaging, and it was a great deal, so you could pretty much find these just about anywhere. Our first rinse is going to be in Zenith Cleaner 777. It's going to go through this multiple times, but now we could turn our attention back over to the workstation. Guys, you want to make sure that this is perfectly clean, so as soon as everything comes out of that machine, we're ready to rock. So while everything's getting cleaned up, I decided to take a look through all the carnage. I mean, there's just so much rusted up stuff here. It just really amazes me. I mean, it's pretty crazy, Rolex's build quality. But now we're going to move over to the next step. It's going to go into 1001. Once again, another Zenith cleaner. I like to do two rinses in this, two separate jars, just to make sure it's fully clean. So here's a prime example, parts that we cannot reuse. I mean, just none of this stuff is usable. So first pass in the 1001 is good. We're going to rinse this off before we move over to the next step. And our balance wheel. Now this is completely gone. I mean, there's nothing I could do with this. There's too much rust in the hairspring and on the actual balance itself. But now we can move over. We're on our last and final cleaning stage. Taking a look at more parts. This is the setting lever detent. I mean, this thing is just gone. I can't use it. A lot of the crown wheels, yokes, I mean, just all this stuff needs to be replaced. So now at this point, this is when I like to kick on the heater, just so as soon as this is done in this cleaning stage, I could rinse everything off and throw it right in the heater. Now guys, if you're trying to clean watch parts by hand, especially brass wheels and stuff, if you clean them and then leave them out to oxidize without drying fully, they will rust. It'll be all for nothing, but we'll put it right in the heater, take this out, and we're good to start taking this basket apart. So now we are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm super happy with how this is working out. Guys, I was trying to get the best camera angles. Bear with me. I will figure them out eventually. Just winded up our fresh new mainspring. Now we can start getting the barrel ready and get this thing put in. So now we're getting the barrel itself ready. I like to apply a very thin amount of braking grease all around the barrel wall. Same thing with the arbor itself. You guys have to remember this is a part that comes into contact with another part. So nice a little bit HP 1300. This will prevent any wear and tear. Put the cap back on and then close this thing up. And there we go. So now we have a fresh barrel. This one's perfect. It's in perfect working order. So now what I like to do is check my barrel end shake. There's going to be some tolerance. You need tolerance for something like this. Once again, this is a moving part. So if there is no end shake within the arbor, it just won't deliver power correctly. So a lot of people ask, what are these little pink stones? So these are our cap jewels. They hold oil, basically suspend it so it reduces friction over wheel pivots. Now, I tried to over oil these, however, this is not enough oil. I just wanted to give you guys a visual representation. It needs a nice circle, it needs to be clean so it fits between the springs. Basically the left and right side, that's how we know we have enough oil. So now we could turn our attention over to this stem. Now this is not reusable. I mean, there's way too much pitting and it's just not cost effective. A new stem is pretty cheap, so I'm gonna actually replace it. As soon as I removed this crown, I realized why water got in here. This gasket is completely the wrong size and it more than likely did not mate up with the tube, allowing water to come in. So we got a fresh stem here. I just cut it, shaved it, and now we can reinsert it back onto the crown. So now here's our winding and sliding pinion. I'm going to paint these brigade teeth with 9504. A few dabs, paint it on lightly. This stuff is going to spread itself out regardless. So now we can put back on the yoke for the sliding pinion, make sure everything is working and functioning properly, it's moving freely, and then we could apply some 9504 just to the face of this, just so when I put the yoke for the setting wheel on, it's already there. Once again, more lubrication needed. This is for the setting lever detent. So now we can get this set down. Once again, we want to apply 9504 to the yoke for the setting wheel, just so when this is all connected, we could check for functionality and start spreading out that grease. Everything's working great. So now we can flip this movement over and move on to the next step. So now we're reassembling it. We're going to start by putting our barrel in. Once we have our minute pinion and minute pinion bridge back in, then we could reinstall the great wheel, move over to the seconds wheel, and lastly, of course, the third wheel. So I'm a firm believer to emblem absolutely everything. This is just the way that I was taught. Just makes absolutely everything so much easier. There's the escape wheel. We're going to let that dry off. Then I can turn my attention over to this forgotten cap jewel. Now I left this one inside of the train wheel bridge. So once again, I'm going to re-clean everything. Then I can move my attention over to the cap jewel itself. Clean that off with a piece of pegwood and reapply oil with my automatic oiler. So now we have the escape wheel going back in, and then we could reinstall the bridge. Finally check our free spin, and everything is moving perfectly. Now we're going to do some work on this winding bridge. A brand new crown wheel and crown wheel cores going in, as well as a brand new screw. These ones were completely toast, but these are fresh parts, so we shouldn't have an issue. And now we can move over to the barrel bridge. So now this thing is slowly starting to come back to life. As you guys can see here, I'm oiling up this post for the next crown wheel as well as the yoke. This is going on for the sliding gear. As long as this is done correctly, you will always have a nice, smooth winding operation. I don't care what anybody says. New click, new spring, once again, more new screws. I would say I replaced about 80%, probably 90% of the screws. And now we could check once again, free spinning, everything is moving flawlessly. Ratchet wheel, sliding gear, absolutely everything is perfect. So now we reinstalled the pallet fork bridge. Now we can hold power. So I like to cycle through everything, make sure everything is working, the seconds wheel is moving, and everything on the watch is just operating before I start applying oil. And all of my hard work has now paid off. I threw the balance back in with a new balance wheel itself, and this thing is running flawlessly. I mean, this thing is perfect. I couldn't have asked for a better turnout. Flipping back up to dial side, so now we could start reinstalling all the motion works, date wheel mounted, pretty much getting this thing ready to go. So now I apply a very little amount of oil to the intermediate date corrector wheel, as well as the actual date corrector itself. Don't want to over oil these parts. They do move, but they're not moving that much, just to ensure everything is functioning properly. So now we're moving along with everything here. We're getting very close to being finished. Last part I want to put back on is the date indicator seating. So I'm going to put this on, get all the screws in, and then we could check it a little bit more. All right, so we got that put down. All the screws are back in. Now we could reinstall this calendar disc. We just want to move the jumper and slide this under all the posts. Of course, once again, checking functionality. Our quickset hack is working perfectly fine. And now we're changing over the time, and the date wheel mounted will flip the date wheel. Perfect. Can't believe it. We're about ready to slap back on this dial, and then we'll be good to go. So now this is the new dial that we have. I mean, I love vintage stuff. I love anything that looks like it has a ton of patina. This has a nice cream loom. I mean, the dial is just flawless. I refer to this stuff as stardust. So we're going to reinstall the dial. Once again, once this is put down, we need to make sure that everything is working. So this was in the client's budget. So this is the dial that we went with. Now we could start reinstalling our hands, and we are getting so close to being done. Sorry guys, I tried to get the best angle of this. Once again, I am still figuring it out. So hopefully in the next one, you guys have got a better, more clear view. All of our hands are on. We're checking, making sure that nothing is slamming into each other, as well as we have a nice date change directly at 12 o'clock. It's very important when setting hands. You want to make sure that these things are addressed. And lastly, our seconds hand goes back on, and this thing is running. So happy with the outcome of this. I mean, nothing's budging into each other. We're about ready to recase this watch, so let's start rebuilding the case. Now, here's the case, fresh from ultrasonic. The client did not want to polish this watch. He wanted to leave it fully intact with all of his original wear marks. I had to clean a lot of this stuff by hand, though, removing all the rust from the threaded parts. Here's our old dial. We're going to throw this to the side, and then we're going to start recasing this watch. So now we got our crystal on the case. We could toss that right over the movement, flip the whole thing upside down. Now we have the movement inside of the case. And we could finally reinstall some of the screws for the main plate. Now, these things were fully stripped out before. Luckily, I was able to dissolve them, put in brand new ones, and now we can actually secure the movement into the case. So now, once again, this thing isn't going to win any beauty pageants, but the most important thing is that it's fully functional. It wasn't in the time, I was on a time constraint, so I couldn't really get these things replated. So now we're moving over to the last part, the automatic module. Once again, Epilum the world, Epilum all these parts, the reversing wheels are going in. Now we can let these things dry off before we reassemble this automatic module. Once again, a very fine amount of oil. This is HP 1300 going right onto the pivots, the base, and the top. Just so as soon as I put these things back together, there's some oil for these things to move around on. So now I did actually have to replace the axle for the oscillating weight here. It was just too far gone. It was fully rusted. So here I am once again, HP 1300, just before reinstalling the bridge. Once we have this bridge set down, we could put back on the pinion for the oscillating weight. Now we could put in a brand new spring clip. This is what actually holds the rotor axle to the actual bridge. Then we could put on the brittle for the spring clip. This is what secures everything all together. Brand new screw once again. Then we could tighten all this down, and then we can move over to actually installing all these reversing wheels. Once those are seated, now we can put the driving wheel. This is what actually turns the ratchet wheel. It's got to go in between both of these. They all have to intertwine. All of the gears have to connect. But once that's done, we toss back on the other side of the bridge, and we could close this thing up. Last of the screws are in. Now we can tighten all these back down, and then we are good to go. Once again, checking functionality. Everything's moving freely. Now we could reinstall this back onto the movement. This thing is so close to being done. The last screws are being tightened. Don't forget, check for functionality and put some HP 1300 on those pivots. But the rotor's in and we have it fully moving. This thing's moving perfectly fine, perfectly freely. I'm about ready to call it a day here. Brand new fresh gasket going in. Then we can put down the case back and screw this all together. Now, a lot of people don't realize this. The crystal retaining ring actually has a separate O-ring. So you want to make sure you reinstall that. That O-ring is definitely vital. We're going to reinstall the click spring there, as well as this flat washer. This slides underneath the spring. So now these V-notches in the bezel, you want to connect them right at the top of the click spring. That's what allows the bezel to move around freely and give that nice clicking sound. And just like that, this watch is fully done. Everything is cased back up. We have the bracelet reinstalled. The only thing I wish is that I had a nice set of matching cream hands. However, the client wanted to keep the original ones, so that's what we did. I mean, this dial looks phenomenal. The entire watch is running perfectly. I mean, this thing looks killer. Now, I hope the client gets to enjoy this for many years to come. Hopefully, he doesn't have any more run-ins with water. But for now, we're going to call it a day. This thing is running. I'm going to observe it for a few days, get it back onto the client's wrist. Hopefully he can enjoy it. So guys, don't forget, like, comment, share, and subscribe. I can't thank you enough once again for tuning in. Stay tuned for next week's video. It's going to be a great one. Happy holidays to all. I'm wishing everyone the best. Enjoy the time with the family, and see you guys next week.